Hello everyone, Tyler King here with a new episode of NuReview. Today I'm doing a review of the 1983 Gary Numan album, Warriors. In each review I do, I tend to have a copy of the album that I'm reviewing on hand. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of Warriors. I do have a copy of the Sister Surprise single. Um, so... What can I say about context of the album? It's released in September 1983. Pretty much the fourth album in a row by Gary Numan released in September. This one follows his 1982 album, I Assassin. I Assassin saw the introduction of funk elements into Gary Numan's music with the inclusion of the bass player Pino Palladino. Pino Palladino is not playing on Warriors. Instead, we get pretty much like Gary's backing band from the Telecon album back. Rrussell Bell is going to be on here playing guitar. Cedric Sharpley is back playing drums, and Payne is back playing keyboards. Gary Numan's brother John Webb is also playing on this album. He does keyboards, percussion, and he also writes the music for the second song on the album, I Am Render. However, most interestingly on the album, we have Bill Nelson, who is playing guitars and keyboards as well as co-producing the album with Gary. The two have disagreements about how the album should sound. Gary has gone so far as to say that Bill Nelson's treatment of the album, the initial mix of it, had it sounding much more pop-oriented, and Gary actually ends up remixing and re-recording a couple of the songs on the album. Unfortunately, despite the fact that we do have a stronger presence of guitars on the album and we do have a few familiar faces, this is going to be the album where Gary introduces female backing singers. And he's also gotten Dick Morrissey to play saxophone on the album. Dick Morrissey is most famous for playing saxophone on the Blade Runner soundtrack, which is where Gary hears Morrissey's playing for the first time, and unfortunately he kind of decides to put Morrissey's playing all over the thing, which is not going to be very good. So the album opens up with the title track, Warriors. Warriors opens with this kind of fretless bass intro. It's a little reminiscent of some of the stuff on I Assassin, with this very frantic drum machine playing underneath it before the song opens up, and we're treated to these very warm synths and this very gently strummed acoustic guitar. And the song really has this warmth and depth to it that we didn't get on really any song on I Assassin. And as far as first songs go, this one's pretty damn good. Lyrically, he's talking about shedding his old image. He refers to himself from the Pleasure Principle days as this white-faced clown. And the chorus on here feels particularly anthemic. Gary is saying, I fell for so long for you. And on this song, Warriors, we're treated to a guitar solo towards the end of it. And we haven't really heard a guitar solo on a Gary Numan song since it must have been years from the 1979 Replicas album with Two-Way Army. The second song on the album is I Am Render, which is a shame because the first song is so good. And I Am Render, a more fitting title would have been I Am Bored. Instrumentally, it feels like any of the throwaway songs from I Assassin, like the title track on that album, or war songs. There's some cool crushing guitars on it, and these really interesting sounding stuttering synths during the chorus, but the obnoxious minute-long saxophone solo in the middle of the song just completely takes away any enjoyment I would have otherwise had for this song. And then there's another one that closes out the song. It's ridiculous. Luckily, things pick back up with the third song, The Iceman Comes. I don't mean that they pick up in the tempo sense. I mean musically. This song has this very open feeling to it. It's very ambient, especially compared to a lot of the other songs on this album. And it feels, I was very reminiscent of some of the songs off of Gary Numan's Dance album a couple of years back. Lyrically, it's also incredibly sparse. Numan is literally fearing for this Iceman figure that is coming for him. This song is the first time that we're treated to any kind of female backing vocals on a Gary Numan song. On this album, they're going to be performed by Tracey Ackerman, and her performance on this song, she's not really saying anything. She's more of just kind of adding this very like ambient feel to the song, which is, it feels very pretty. There's a saxophone bit on this song, but it doesn't feel out of place like it did on I Am Render. It actually really complements the song, and there's this very pretty guitar solo that kind of takes us out of the song. And the fourth song, This Prison Moon, right out of the gate, it's much faster, it's much funkier than anything that we've heard so far on the album. Tracey Ackerman, again, is doing backing vocals on this song. The way that she sings, If Only the Sun Would Shine Tonight, is just lovely. It's one of my favorite parts of any song on this album. Unfortunately, it's killed by another fucking saxophone solo, and Tracey starts fucking going like doo 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 all over the damn thing, and it just kills it, and it sucks because it starts out as such a good song, and then Dick Morrissey just fucking kills it. After that, we have My Centurion, which is another more synth-funky song. This one in particular has some cool wah guitars going on in the background of it. After Gary says, all I can do now is wait for the noise, the guitars get more crunchy, more distorted, more angry, and it all comes to a head with another guitar solo. Also, the percussion on the song has a much more frantic feeling to the way that Cedric Sharpley is playing it, and that's the end of side one. The second side of the album opens with Sister Surprise. This is going to be the longest song on the album, and it's the second single released for it. It opens with this really pulsating machine sound with these very discordant synthesizer notes being played in the background, and it takes up the better part of the first couple of minutes on the song. The whole thing feels very reminiscent of a song like Cry the Clock Said or Slow Car to China from Gary Numan's Dance album. And then after that, the song opens up into, predictably, another synth-funk number. This one has some guitars on it that could have been lifted straight from David Bowie's song Fame. And the song, lyrically, it almost seems to be about a guy who's pimping his sister. Sell a slim body to the man next door, my sister surprise, we are the pleasure creation gone wrong. The song, admittedly, it goes on for a couple of minutes too long. There's a sax solo in it again, of course. The last couple of minutes of the song aren't really necessary, but they're not offensive in any way. And after that, we have the TikTok Man. This song feels much more angry than something like Sister Surprise. There's these very distorted guitars that are featured all over the song when it opens up, and it's dealing with similar lyric tropes that Gary's been singing about almost for the course of this album. People stepping on his dreams, people intruding on him, people closing in on him. Like, we get it. It also features more doot doot and sax. Great. The next song on the album is Love is Like Clock Law. This one actually features the ticking of a clock as a rhythmic instrument, which I thought was pretty interesting. And lyrically, it's different from the other songs on this album in that it seems to be about Gary dealing with a breakup. It almost feels like a continuation of Cry the Clock Said from the Dance album. This one's just a little bit faster, and it's not as sparse. However, this one is musically the least dense on the album. It has these chiming bells that come in every now and then on the song. And when Gary sings "Don't Leave Me Here All Alone" and Cedric's drumming comes in underneath that, that's as good as it gets. And there's an overabundance of saxophone on this song, but it doesn't feel out of place. This really is the first ballad on a Gary Numan album since Dance, and this should have been the closing song on this album. It's such a good song, and it sticks out a lot because he just seems to be doing the same thing on every song on the album, and then Love Is Like Clock Lock comes on, and it's completely different, and that just gets your attention like right off the bat. But no, instead we get The Rhythm of the Evening, which closes out the album. It is again another synth-funk song. This time Gary is playing the role of a prostitute. He's saying, "Love me, I'm cheap to rent." Immediately, like as soon as the song opens, like that's the first thing you hear. The TikTok man makes an appearance as a character who seems to be enjoying Gary's company, and he says, "Don't tell me lies." And then later in the song, Gary actually sings, "These boys of pleasure are nothing more than faggots." And he's dealing with this theme of homoeroticism, kind of like he did on a song like It Must Have Been Years off of the Replicas album, in which he's doing these homosexual acts, but he's not 100% convincing himself that he enjoys them, and he seems to almost be doing this against his wishes. I do not really like his use of the word faggot on this song. It's just really out of place, and it's not a word that you really ever have to hear Gary Numan use. And the song has another overly long outro, accentuated by another saxophone solo that goes on for way too long. And I feel like if it weren't for the lyrics of this song, it would just be a very forgettable last song on an album that should have ended one song ago. And that's the Warriors album. Feelings about the album, it's definitely not my favorite Gary Numan album, in case you can't tell. Instrumentally, it's just more of the same over and over and over again. And on an album like Telecon, for instance, you have the juxtaposition of slower songs with faster songs. Or, even Dance did that to an extent, and instead on Warriors, we're just hit over the head repeatedly with the same synth-funk sound that he started an album ago on I, Assassin. Just this one with more obnoxious saxophone playing and some not too bad female backing vocals. Granted, there are some really good moments on this album. As a whole, though, it doesn't particularly do anything for me. It's a shame that Gary has gone down this route on Warriors. The whole synth-funk thing is something that he's not going to shed for the next handful of albums, and like I said in my review of I, Assassin, it pretty much just goes downhill from here. The next album, Berserker, I do like a lot more than Warriors, but he's not going to hit the highs of something like The Pleasure Principle or Telecon or even Dance for another 11 years after Warriors is released. Another thing that doesn't really help the album is the imagery. It's this very dollar store Mad Max look to it. And at least on on I, Assassin, it had the lyrical allusions to back up the look that Gary had in support for that album. on Warriors, he's not really singing about, like life after the bomb drops or anything to justify this. At the end of the day, this is the first Gary Numan album that I would say is bad. I'll take that back. It's much more bland and much more mediocre than bad. As far as favorite songs from the album, I would go with the title track Warriors. I would go with the Iceman Comes, and I would go with My Love Is Like Clock Law. And as for least favorite songs, it would probably be I Am Render, This Prison Moon, and the last song on the album, The Rhythm of the Evening. I'm going to give this album a 5 out of 10. That's me being a little bit more generous than I probably should. So, yeah, that's my review for Warriors. So, did you like my review? Probably not if you're a hardcore Gary Numan fan. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Is Warriors your favorite Gary Numan album? Is it your least favorite Gary Numan album? Does it bring you back to any particular time in your life? After this, I'm going to be doing a review of Gary Numan's Berserker album, and I might be doing a surprise review as well. So keep tuned to the channel. So that's Tyler King with NuReview, Gary Numan's Warriors album, 5 out of 10.